We are recording.
Great. Well, hi everyone. My name's Emma Kasbrak and I'm the Head of Marketing and Communications at Archery GB. Prior to that, I was a BBC journalist for nearly 10 years, mainly on the news website in that time. I did a little bit of sport as well, but covered pretty much every type of story. As long as it happened in England or the Channel Islands, I was probably involved in covering it in some way. And before that, I was a journalist on a local newspaper as well. So my whole sort of background has been in journalism. So the start of this session today, we're going to do a little bit about what makes a good story, and then how to sort of pitch your story to the media, and then a little bit about sort of constructing a good story for whether it's your club website or a press release or a social media post. It's all broadly the same sort of skill set, but yeah, if we just sort of go into the basics of storytelling to begin with. So stories are an essential part of how we communicate, and I would sort of say you already know how to tell a good story. It's just making sure that you pick out the relevant bits that a journalist wants to know when you come to tell your story. So when it comes to stories from archery, for us, we're looking for sort of clubs that are doing great things, individuals that are doing interesting things, projects, and it's everything that can help us to promote the sport, get more members in, get members into volunteering, all that sort of thing. So at Archery GB, we've got a lot of different ways that we tell stories. They can be written, spoken, or visual. So it might be a blog post on our website. We've got 3 websites. Our main Archery GB one. We have Start Archery, which is aimed at beginners, and then the National Tour Final website, which is mainly used for tour standings, but also to promote ticket sales. So they've all got very different functions. We've also got a podcast, The Way of the Bow. I know some of you are involved in podcasting as well. That's another great storytelling medium. And then we've also got social media. So we are active on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We've got a LinkedIn account as well. We don't use X so much anymore because we don't really like the content on that platform. And we have looked a little bit at Blue Sky and Threads, but they are not sort of, don't have brilliant reach for us at the moment. So we're sort of just keeping an eye on those ones. You don't need to be a comms professional or a journalist to do good social media and storytelling, though. You just need to spot a good story and know what information is going to bring it to life. Don't worry so much at the start with thinking, what platform does this need to go on? Should it be a podcast? Should it be a blog post? Just think, first of all, is this a good story? So I've just got a few examples here of what makes a good story. They're not archery related at all. So man bites dog, because normally we expect dogs to bite men. So it's kind of the other way around. I love the one about the seagull that got covered in curry. The seagull was okay in the end, and it's just one of my favourite stories. And then the other one, if I just move the screen around, I don't know if people can see that. Drunk woman steals 45-foot ferry while shouting, "I'm Jack Sparrow." So it sort of just shows you that a headline is often what brings a story to life. And like I say, you know good stories because you'll sort of see them when you're out and about, whatever sort of news you engage with, whether it's on Facebook or BBC News website, your local paper. They're the stories that you tend to tell your friends about. So those are the ones that sort of stick out for you. Sorry, my screen just frozen. So I just like this quote, "Let's sit crooked and talk straight." It's just a good sort of storytelling quote. So the best stories, I think, are the ones that provoke a reaction. And the best way to think of those are the Facebook reactions. So, you know, when someone posts something, you can like it, love it, care, be sad or be angry. So if you just think of that when it comes to your storytelling, it'll probably help you to tell a good story. We're all storytellers. We all tell stories to each other. That's how you form bonds, how you build relationships. So I would just say you already know how to tell stories. It's just tweaking them a bit for the media because they have a certain way of telling them, that they are looking for certain things when they come to tell a story. So I love a GIF. In journalism, we talk about the pub test and the granny test. So the pub test is, it's a good story if you walk into the pub, see your mate, and you say, I've got to tell you about this. And the granny test is, you should be able to tell a story in such a way that your granny would understand it. And I'm not saying, I don't know any of your grannies personally, but I guess what it means is it should be quite simple to understand without any assumed knowledge. So when you're talking about archery, if you're writing something to a journalist and you say, we've got a compound bow, have a go, explain what a compound bow is. Don't assume any knowledge, and don't assume that the journalist is going to go away and Google it, because even if they do, they might get it wrong. So it's better if we just explain it in very basic terms. So as journalists, we talk about the 6 W's. So I'm just going to move my screen around again a little bit. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. So think about those things before you start writing your story, and list all of the possible questions that a reader might have. So, for example, if it was a story about a Start Archery Week event at your club, people are going to want to know where it is, how to find it if it's not immediately obvious, when it's happening, who's organising it, what you can expect if you go along to the event, how could be how long will it take, how do I book on, can I just turn up, and why should I come along? And if you get all of those elements in, then you'll have the basics of a really good story pretty much covered. And you can apply that to, you know, any story really. So if you've got a fundraising event, go back to that again. Where is it happening? When? How are you raising the money? What are people going to be doing? Is it a 24-hour shoot? Is it a raffle? A sponsored event? Who's taking part? And why are they doing it? Once you've got all of that information in, you need to think about quotes. So good quotes convey some kind of emotion. We don't want the sort of boring corporate quote that sounds like it was written by the PR person because the person who was supposed to provide the quote couldn't be bothered. So there's a really nice spoof account called Lytham St. Anne's on Facebook, and they are great at getting quotes that just don't sound believable at all. So Oscar, a 5-year-old boy, on hearing that a rope bridge had been removed from the play park, said, "The rope bridge was the main highlight of my visit to this park. I am deeply disappointed at its removal, and I am just praying that it's a temporary measure. This rope bridge brought so much joy to the younger community, and I know I won't be the only one upset. Let's hope it will be reinstated before the summer comes to a close." I'm going to guess that Oscar is not a 5-year-old boy. Oscar is probably Oscar's mom, or maybe the journalists themselves. So if you are adding a quote to a press release, make sure it sounds like how people actually speak, and make sure it sounds like a human, I would say. There's a nice one there from a footballer. "I am building a fire, and every day I train, I add more fuel. At just the right moment, I light the match." It's a really powerful quote. So it's a good one because it conveys the emotion of that person. It sounds like how somebody speaks, and it's memorable. But as I say there, the bad quotes are the ones that sound false. Don't sound like, try not to sound like Oscar from Lytham St. Anne's. Don't use jargon or corporate speak, and don't use a quote to convey information. So you don't want to say, "Bob, the club secretary, said this event is happening on the 5th of June at 2 p.m. That's not a quote, that's just information that could be in the story. And then the quote could be, "This is a fantastic event. We're looking forward to welcoming the entire community to have a go at the best sport around." That would add colour, and that's something that a journalist will use, and that's the sort of thing that they're looking for. So I just thought it would be interesting to have a look at what people search for when they search for archery. And you can do this yourself if you go on Google Trends and just type archery in, or if you go on Google and start typing "is archery." And these are the sort of top results that come up. Hard, haram, hard to learn, hunting ethical. Try not to think about that one. Healthy, harder than shooting. But these are the top questions that people have about archery. What colour is the bull on an archery target? I know there is not a bull on an archery target, but that's what people call it, particularly journalists. What is archery? What colour is the centre of the target in archery? How to aim? How to become an archery instructor? How to build an archery target stand? How to score? Is it hard? So these are all things that might make interesting blog posts if you were running a club website, because they're the most common questions that people have. And because they're the most common questions that people have, if your headline contains that question and people search for it, then hopefully your page will appear higher up in search results than other people's. And if you can use those questions to kind of hook people in, then that's a really good approach to take. 2 seconds, sorry. Now, when it comes to website articles, there's 3 types that you can have: cornerstone articles, product pages, and blog posts. So I'll just give you a little bit of an overview of those 3 types of articles. So cornerstone articles, that should be the core content of your website. So if you're running your club's website, they're the pages and posts that you want to perform best on Google, and they'll usually cover everything that's important about a particular topic. So a good one for a club might be how to start an archery club, with links, guides, videos, contact details. We have this sort of content on the Archery GB site. Types of archery would be another really good one, because people search for that all the time. We get a lot of people that come to our Start Archery site because they're searching for what is field archery or what is 3D archery. So we make sure that we have content that answers those questions. Whatever type of archery your club has, you can form a cornerstone article around it. So what is target archery, or how is scoring done in archery? They're the types of articles that you shouldn't really need to update all that often, because the content won't change, much like the pyramids. But it doesn't mean you can't add links on them that go off to other things. So, you know, you could have one that says, how do I get into archery? That explains everything about your beginner courses. And then you add down the bottom, and here's a link to click that takes you to a page with all the latest course dates on it. The other type of website page is a product page. For you, this is more likely to be things like courses, qualifications, events, competitions, Start Archery Week, competitions aimed at particular groups of people like newbies or veterans. So there are certain things that people look for on a product page, whether you're selling succulents or an archery competition. I would say the masters at this are sites like Amazon, but any site should give you a sort of broad overview if they're selling things. So the things that people tend to look for are an image. So if you've held competitions before, use a picture, because it reassures people to see what the event will look like. It gives them more of an idea than words would a lot of the time. A clear description of what it is. So if it's a competition, you need to explain the format, the distance they'll be shooting, who can enter, all of that information that you would normally probably have in a club newsletter anyway, but that's the kind of stuff you want to put on your page. A price, and then a call to action. So if it's like click here to book, or click here to email to secure your place, whatever it is. Contact details are always useful for people who've got questions, and then the date and other sort of basic information, date, time. The other things that really help product pages to appear higher up on Google are reviews. So if you've got people that come along to your competitions, ask them if they'll give you a quote. If they've come from other clubs and you've organised a big competition, you've had people from all over your county attend, give them a feedback form, or just ask for some quotes that you can stick onto your pages, because Google will read them and think this product page is better than other product pages because it contains reviews. And it can just be something as simple as, Archery said this was a fantastically organised competition. I had a great time. The bacon butties were out of this world. It's worth doing because, again, it reassures people, along with seeing a picture. They get more of a feel for the event than just date, time, click here to enter. Try to avoid jargon or technical language. Think of it from the perspective of a beginner. You don't want people to feel out of depth. It's always a good idea to link to an FAQ. So On all of our national competition pages, we have event guides that will explain in really simple terms, you'll be shooting this round at this distance, these are the age categories if that's applicable, just to sort of demystify it and make it less scary for people. And then the final one are blog posts. So these should answer all of the questions that visitors to your website might have. It could be things like examples I've got here, write-ups of events, or it could be something like questions that people have about beginners courses. You know, what age do you have to be to start archery? I know people get asked that all the time. Do I need to stay with my children when they're on the course? What do I need to bring with me? You know, I've seen sort of really good club pages where they'll say, bring something to tie your hair back, bring stuff for the weather, bring water, you don't need anything else, closed toe shoes. Others don't give you any information, and then I sort of think people might come along and feel like they're on the back foot already because they're not prepared. So if you do those blog posts as well, then you can email them to people when they book and just sort of, rather than have to contain all the information in an email, just include a link and say, here's everything that you need to know. So when it comes to writing a blog post, then what makes a good blog post? And these are the stories on your website. So think of them as stories. They should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Think about your key message, the questions that people might ask and the answers, and why should somebody read to the end. So for example, Archery UK magazine, we try and have a reason for every story that's in there. So if there's a club spotlight on, say, a club that's secured some land and built its own facility, then you don't just want to hear about, oh, well done, that club's done a great job. You want to hear how they did it, because that's useful learning that you can take away from the story. If a club's organised an amazing Start Archery Week event and they've managed to fill all their beginner course spaces, we want to know how they did it. How did they promote it? How did they get so many people along? What did they do on the day that persuaded people to sign up to their beginners courses? So think about your key message. Journalists talk about paragraphs, but they're really what people think of as sentences, which is a bit confusing. So if you look on the BBC News site, every line starts on a new sentence. That's a lot easier for people to read than text as it appears in a book. I try to just have one point per paragraph. Again, it just makes it a lot easier for people to follow. And write headings with readers in mind. So try not to be too cryptic or fall into the local newspaper trap of using a pun that doesn't really mean anything to anybody. You need to be a bit more straightforward on a website story. And then use keywords and headings to show Google what you're writing about. So ideally you would have archery in your headline somewhere, because you want people to find you by looking for archery. I know it sounds simple, but sometimes it's just worth remembering the basics. And then I would always suggest that you get someone to proofread it before you put it live. If you can't find anyone to proofread it, then read it aloud, because you'll tend to notice mistakes more if you do. If you can print it off, even better. So I know it's not great for the environment, but you generally tend to spot mistakes more easily if you print them. For stories on the Archery GB website, we aim for around 300 words. That's about 6 or 7 sentences. The reason we do that is because people's attention spans are very short when they're online. On average, on the BBC News site, people will read a story for 30 seconds. A minute is about 300 words, but we tend to think people are a little bit more engaged if they're on an archery club site, because they're already there, because they're interested, so you can get away with it being a little bit longer. And then at the end of your blog post, think about what you want them to read next. So always have an onward link, sort of signpost them on that journey. If they've read about your beginners courses, then it's probably pretty obvious you'd have a booking link. If it's a post about a competition, you'd have a link to enter that competition. But it can be anything. You might have done a write-up about a brilliant fundraising event. Link to something else that your club's done, because it just gives people a flavour of what you're about. So when you write a story, you need to have in mind the intent of the user. So are they looking to make a purchase, like booking onto a course, or are they looking for information? and decide what makes a successful action for you. So is it someone booking a place on your beginner's course or entering a tournament? You need to make it as easy as possible for them to do it. So don't hide links or put them right down the bottom, because a lot of people won't get that far. Give them just enough information that they will then feel like they want to take action. If you're asking them to send an email to enter or book something, tell them what information they need to include on that email, because again, it just makes it easier for people. Keep in mind the tone that you're writing in. You want to appear friendly and welcoming. Try not to use terminology that new people to archery won't understand. Attention spans, as I mentioned, are really short on the internet, so it shouldn't take more than 3 clicks for people to be able to do the thing that they want to do when they come to your website. So have a look at your website and see if people can book onto a beginner's course within 3 clicks. If they can't, then it's probably going to be too confusing and they'll go elsewhere. And think about all of those 3 articles that I mentioned: cornerstones, product pages, and blog posts. They can all be used to drive engagement on your site and hopefully recruit new members. Representation also matters. So when people consider joining a club, they want to know if there are people there that look like them. So if you are lucky enough, or you've worked really hard to have a great mix of ages, genders, different backgrounds, use pictures to demonstrate that. You might have your 3 or 4 favourite people at the club that are always happy to be in photos, but if they all look very similar demographic, then it's not going to sort of reassure people that there's a place for them. So a little note about accessibility now. You might see when you add pictures to your website that you can add alt tags. I'd always encourage people to fill those in and describe what you can see in the picture, not just for blind and visually impaired people, but for all sorts of different people who like to use alt tags or the read aloud function when they go onto a website. Around 2 million people in the UK have significant sight loss, and about a third of those use screen readers. So if you don't use an alt tag, then they're not really going to understand what you're showing them a picture of. Make sure as well that those alt tags describe what's in the picture. I've seen some really terrible ones used by journalists where it'll just be like a road and it just doesn't mean anything. Try and be as descriptive as possible of what the picture is showing people. Alt tags aren't just for VI users though, they're also used by Google Images. So if you had a picture of your club and you put Ordco Archers in Shropshire, say, that will appear in Google Images when people are trying to find your club. So it makes it easier for them to find you as well. And then a little bit about reading age. Does anyone know what the average reading age in the UK is?
We recently done this in work. Okay, take in mind there's 76,000 people in our company, and we got it down to 13 years of age.
Okay. Anyone else? Higher or lower?
I'm going to say 9 to 11.
Yeah, it's 9. So don't assume that everyone wants big words and really detailed prose. If they do, then they'll go and find a book that covers that need for them. But keep your text really clear and easy to understand. That is also helpful for people whose first language isn't English. People with dyslexia, could be any number of reasons why, but keep it really simple would be my advice. So you've written your amazing story. You've got a brilliant picture, a really colourful quote that's brought it to life. You've put it on your website, shared it on social media. So how do you know if it's hitting the mark? You can set up Google Analytics and link that to your website. That will tell you how many page views your stories have had. It also tells you the average reading time, which is a really nice indicator. Anything above 30 seconds is good engagement. If it's less than that, then I'd probably think about having a bit of a rewrite to try and keep people's interest. If you're sharing it on social media, then you can look at how many shares it has, reactions, comments, but also look at what kinds of things people are saying in the comments. And then you can just ask people to have a look at the blog post and give you some feedback, tell you what they thought about it. If you're promoting an event, so for example, a Start Archery Week event, it's always worth asking. Archery GB does provide you with a questionnaire so that you can ask people, and we survey attendees as well. But if you're running a beginner's course, I would always say, you know, how did you hear about us? Either informally at the end of that course, or have a feedback form and ask people to fill it in. And I've just got a couple of examples there. A post we did for World Menopause Day. And someone commented, I love that you've considered this and so much of the advice is so transferable too. Thank you. A comment like that is probably, you know, more meaningful than the fact that there's only a few comments and shares, because if it just reached a few people, then we consider it worth it. On the right there, you've got a post that we did for World Sight Day of Nick Thomas, who's a VI archer, explaining how he aims. And that was one of our first TikTok videos and had 14.3 thousand views. We are up to a lot more since then, but again, we considered that a success because we're talking about a niche area of a niche sport. So don't judge yourselves by sort of bigger accounts. Think about what is a good result for you. So I just wanted to sort of hand over to you guys on the call at this point. Has anyone written for the web or used social media to promote archery? And would you be able to just share a little bit about how it's gone?
I kind of have to do this for the podcast quite often.
How do you promote the podcast?
Social media more than anything, Facebook. But our main thing is actually getting down on and talking to people when we're actually at events and stuff like that. So a lot of it comes from that. But people are starting to now recognise us on Facebook, on Instagram, and stuff like that as well. So it does help.
Yeah.
It does also help that I work in marketing as well. So I have a little bit of an edge on people with that one.
Yeah. That's great. I can't see who's got their hands up there, Gail. Can you? Someone has,
Yeah,
but all I can see is initials RC.
Ramesa.
Oh, thanks.
I would say that, so I frequently post on my social media and I really like it because it sort of shows my progress and story, and so people can follow along as well. So people from my club often be like, oh, I heard you did this, and they sort of know it from my social media. And I guess social media probably also helps with sponsorship and just getting your name out there. So yeah, that's probably.
Yeah, definitely. And that raises the profile not just of you but the sport as well, because people will see it who are in the sport already, but also those who aren't, and then they might think, oh, actually that looks quite cool.
Yeah, I've done other like sports and things, like there's some wind sailing people and I'm like, wow, that's actually really cool. So people would think that about archery as well. So I find that cool.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Marjan,
thanks.
I think I'm quite off. I find it really hard to post anything on social media, or like whenever I'm asked to write something, it takes me forever to do it. So like I'm in Northern Ireland and I've done Project Maya before. I was asked to write about it, and then I thought for me it was really, really hard to write about.
Yeah,
I know like there's a benefit of doing it and sharing our like what we do. Like my mom is really good at it, so she would like post stuff about. So we have a fun day happening this weekend with like, archery and stuff. So my mom did like a whole post about it, and she like likes to talk about her stuff. I struggle so much with posting it on social media or like talking anything like at all related to social media or stuff like that.
I would say you're not alone in that. It might sound a bit surprising, but even some of our athletes at Olympic and Paralympic level hate putting themselves out there and do social media, but they know that obviously they have to do it in their role as an athlete. I would just think about what you are comfortable with, and you know, not everyone wants to do video or a podcast, but even a photo and just writing a caption is a great way to sort of get awareness out there of the sport, or finding somebody at your club that is comfortable doing those things and filming it for them, but just sharing it on their behalf. Things like just videos of have-a-goes are really good. Like they probably encourage more people into the sport than seeing the written word, because it gives you a more of a feel of an event. But you wouldn't necessarily need to be in it. Just filming other people having fun is a great way of doing that. So I'll just move on to the next slide. Sorry, no one else has hand up. So approaching the media then. The one thing I would say is make it easy for the reporter. Reporters are, like we all are, very overworked people. There are less of them around now, so a lot of newspapers have had staffing cuts. A lot of local BBC radio, they don't staff on the weekends anymore. It's the same with regional telly. So it is harder to sell your story in the first place. But in our experience at Archery GB, they do love covering archery because they find it a bit different. They find it interesting. They usually have loads of questions. The other reason that journalists love it is because when they come along, they say, "Can I have a go?" And they're probably not going to do that if they're doing a story about weightlifting or whitewater rafting. So from that sense, it is a slightly easier sell. And they can usually link it to something that's happening in the media. There will always be a film that is coming out that has archery in it. I saw the other day, 28 years later, there's heavily got archery in. So I know a few years ago, before my time, we did a campaign sort of saying prepare for the zombie apocalypse. That's kind of a fun way that you can encourage people into archery. The other one is obviously Katniss and sort of that kind of young adult fiction. Brave got a lot of people into archery. So there's usually a kind of relevant media hook. When you're sending a press release, send a photo. There are not many full-time photographers left on newspapers, so if you can provide a photo, they are much more likely to use your press release. If you haven't got one because it's an upcoming event, send them an image from a previous event to promote it, and then send them some pictures afterwards as well, because they love having picture stories. It fills a space for them and it's great for us. Make sure that you show people having fun. Try not to do pictures of the backs of people's heads. It's okay to ask if you think people might say no, but generally if they're having fun, they don't mind you taking a picture. Obviously it's different if you've got kids there. Make sure that you're asking the right person for permission to take pictures. Attach your photos. Don't send them embedded in a Word document. It makes it really hard for people to use. And just have a quick look and make sure you've got the basics, that it's in focus, that people haven't got their eyes closed. Provide a caption, but don't worry too much about having everyone's names unless it's relevant to the story. It's fine for the caption to just be people having fun at a have a go, or members of such and such a club at charity event. They are the perfect opportunity though, have a goes, to get lots of stock photos. So Archery GB has a Smug Mug account, which you're welcome to go on and have a look at photos if you need them. But I would also suggest building up your own sort of stockpile of photos so that you've got them to hand for media coverage. If you're doing a school have a go, just check with the teacher. They'll always know who can feature in photos. We've done lots of have a go events at Lilleshall with local school kids. The teachers are really good. If there's any kids that can't be photographed, they'll put them on the end of the shooting line, not make it obvious, and then you know who you can safely photograph. So has anyone ever done media? Been interviewed for local telly, radio or news that they could share?
Yeah, I have.
And how did you find it?
Nerve-wracking to start with, because it was kind of on the spot. Going back about 4 or 5 years ago, we lost our indoor range to a huge fire through no fault of our own. Chemical plant on the industrial estate went up in flames and took us out. Anyway, and that was just near COVID time. And somebody put a call out from the club asking if anybody knew of any places similar that we could use. So somebody sent a message to our local councillor. He then pinged it out on his social media, and then before I knew it, the local paper got in touch with me and said, "Can we do an interview?" So I said, "Yeah." When? He said, "Can you come down now?" So I got in the car, drove down to the place that had burnt out and had to do this interview, and it's kind of all had to come from the heart. And there was times when there was tears coming out my eyes because a building was in the background. It was all blackened and everything had burnt down. And yeah, so it was a little bit nerve-wracking. And you feel like when you're being interviewed, every word has to be word perfect. And sometimes you're spluttering for words, aren't you? You know, it doesn't, for the untrained person,
Yeah,
you know, words can come out wrong. So it was nerve-wracking. Yeah. And then I did something for Archery GB on clout. It was like a talk for about an hour and a half. And
okay.
then it was questions and answers and things like that. And again, you know, you've got to know your stuff there, and you've got to be quite confident in a way that you can answer any question that's thrown at you. So there's two different sides of things there. It's knowing about what you're talking about and being confident, and then the unexpected of what you are going to be asked from the media, asking me about the premises that burnt down and what I needed.
Yeah. If you get approached by journalists, it's always worth saying to them, you know, can you send me a few bullet points or a bit of an overview of what kind of thing you're going to be asking me? And most of them are happy to do that. We had one of our staff members interviewed at the weekend about how we're going to be hosting the European Championships, and it was a radio interview. It was going to be live. So I said, can you just send us a few bullet points over? And they did about 8 bullet points of what they were going to cover. And I asked the staff member how it went, and he said, oh, it was fine. They covered most of them, but then they just went off at a complete tangent. So it is worth asking, you know, what do you want to talk to me about? Can you send some guidance to help me prepare? But the thing with local radio is you might then be interviewed by the person who didn't prepare those questions, so it can go off a bit, especially if it's a presenter rather than a journalist. Newspaper's a bit different because it's written, so it's absolutely fine if you start to give them a quote and then say, oh, hold on, I didn't quite mean it that way. You can change what you want to say. And local TV is very rarely going to be live. So again, with them, it's absolutely fine for you to say, oh, can I just say that bit again? They will cut the bits out where you stumble on words, or you're thinking, or you say the wrong thing, or pause. So they want it to sound like a natural conversation though, so don't worry too much if there's ums and ers, because it wouldn't sound right if there weren't, because that's how we expect speech to sound. I could see someone else has got their hand up again, but I'm sorry, I can only see initials. Oh, thanks.
Right, this is probably not as like nice and deep, but I did. So for my home education group, we made a gardeners, like we went to the Gardeners World show and we created a garden. And to be honest, I had no idea this was going to happen, but these people just sort of came up to us from the news or something because our garden won.
Oh, wow.
To be honest, I actually did not know what to say. I was just waffling the whole time. But it was really fun because it was me and my friends, so we were sort of bouncing off each other and saying stuff about the garden and things. But no, to be honest, it was really fun.
It's always nicer if you can be interviewed with somebody as well, because then you can sort of bounce off one another. I know our athletes always prefer to be interviewed as a pair or a team. It also just gives you a bit more thinking time because you can kind of take it in turns to answer. So on this next slide, we've just got a summary of some of the key Archery GB projects that you may get involved in and wish to talk about. So obviously Start Archery Week is our biggest acquisition event, usually in May. It's always themed, or it has been for the last couple of years. So last year we themed it around mental health. This year it was themed around community. I don't know what the theme will be for next year yet. I don't think they've come up with it, but it's likely to be about the same time of year. Another one that might come up is our Sport in Mind partnership. That's a charity that we're working with that are providing training. I know some of you guys have done training with them already, and mental health resources. And they also do sort of have-a-goes and social prescribing to introduce people to different sports for mental health benefits. Access Archery Fund, which I won't talk about because Gail's coming on to that in a minute. Project Ramaya, which I think you all know about. We've had some really lovely media coverage on Project Ramaya from different BBC local news and radio over the years again, and it's an interesting story. They like to cover it. We've done it in schools, community groups. So if there's one in your area, that's a good one to sort of share with local media what's going on. The Young Leaders Award, which is a new course that can be delivered in schools. We had a story about that the other day, and that's driven a lot of interest onto our site, onto our schools resources section, which is great. We've got a national tour, the final, coming up at the end of August in Nottingham. It's probably the only event in the UK where people can just go along and watch Olympians and Paralympians competing in a really gorgeous setting. It's also a great one to volunteer at, and there's always a public have a go as well. People go year after year, people that are in archery and also not in archery, they just really enjoy going along and watching it. And then the final one I've put on there is the Festival of Sport, which we are supporting this year. It's taking place in mid-August, I think. It's normally in the east of England, but it's moving to Warwickshire. And I know we've got some volunteers going along to that, and also Jodie Grinham, our reigning Paralympic champion, is going to be appearing at the event as well. It's a massive festival, and they are moving to a bigger site, so it'll be double the size it normally is. And the whole weekend just introduces thousands of families to sport, and archery is one of the most popular activities there. I think possibly because so many families can do it, and a lot of the other sports are kind of limited by age. So yeah, that's another good one to get involved in. So does anyone have any questions about storytelling or approaching media before we move on to the next bit? All good. Okay, I will hand over to Gail.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Emma. I would also say as well, we want to hear about the work you're doing as ambassadors, so it helps raise a profile of volunteering and the great work you're doing at community level to promote archery. So yeah, any work you're doing, please write up a short story and yeah, photos and quotes. That would be really helpful. So I'm very excited to share information about Access Archery Fund. Are you all aware of the Fletcher's Trust? Most of you, they do so much for archery, around disability archery, and we are so lucky to have the Fletcher's Trust. So Archery GB and the Fletcher's Trust are working together to set up a funding pot called Access Archery Fund. So it will be available for archery clubs and archery activity partners to apply to help increase disability archery or enhance their disability archery offer. So the scope of the fund, it would potentially pay for equipment or adaptive devices, provide training and coaching, increase disability awareness. Like Peter, you've been at a VI event today, so it could potentially cover events like that too. It could contribute to enhancing accessible archery facilities, but it would probably pay more for a ramp than a disabled toilet, for example. And obviously we want to be ahead on research and development, so any innovation it could potentially fund as well. So next slide, please, Emma. You're probably aware that the Fletchers already fund a lot of disability archery. So if you're an individual archer or you're a disability organisation like the British Wheelchair Archery Association, you would still apply for funding through the Fletchers Trust. However, if you're an Archery GB club or an Archery Activity Partner, you would be able to apply for the Access Archery Fund. But for us to start offering grants, we first of all need to bring in lots of money so that we can provide the support to clubs and archery activity partners. So hopefully the timescales are that the fund will open in April next year. So that gives us sort of 6 to 8 months to try and raise as much money as possible. So Sue from Comms is working on a fundraising toolkit to help support clubs and activity partners raise money through their clubs. And as Archery GB, we're working with the Paralympic team to try and identify some ideas. So we thought about some challenges, some sort of how many arrows can you shoot in a certain time, or some strength and conditioning type challenges. Also, we're going to set up a bit of a sweepstake on they're going away to a competition, like how many goals do you think they can score during that competition. The athletes have also committed to do a 24-hour shoot in November, and we're also going to look at some prizes, some auctions. You might be able to bid for a coaching session with Lloyd in PAC, for example. So the official launch will take place at the Disability Champs on the 13th of September. We're going to try and do a bit of an impactful video to identify how disability archery can be enhanced by support from the Fletchers and Archery GB. And there'll be like, guess how many knocks in a jar, again, just to try and generate some income. And then Emma's idea for March, when the weather gets a bit better, is a marches for archers. So 10,000 steps or 50 miles a day if you're in a wheelchair, for example, and that you would get sponsored for doing that, or you shoot 1,000 arrows a week. So the next slide, we are also going to develop an Access Archery badge that people will either get given if they raise, say over £25, for example, or they could purchase a badge for, we haven't identified a price, but maybe £10. And then so some of that would go to pay for the badge and the rest would go into the Access Archery pot. Also, I think the next slide, when you renew your membership in September time, you will have the option to make a donation, or if you're paying for a competition or a coaching course, there's an option to make a donation to the Access Archery pot. Also through Sport 80, you can just go into your profile and click on the hearts, and you'd also be able to donate that way. And then finally, if you are a non-member, you could click on a link and be able to donate like you would if you were sponsoring someone to, cancer research. So these are some key dates. That's a link to the article that was launched last week. We are working on getting the Access Archery webpage up and running, and the donation button will hopefully be switched on by the 31st of July. We're going to promote that you can donate through all of our membership renewal e-zines, and obviously the official launch at the Disability Champs on the 13th of September. And then we've got 3 months to really sort of focus on fundraising and generating as much fundraising pot as we can, and then hopefully open the pot up for applications from clubs and AAPs in April. So finally, wanted to pick your brains. Have you got any fundraising ideas or challenges? The Fletchers Trust have a really good link with like their Air Cadets, for example, and obviously Neil, you with the scouting community. Are there any challenges that we could try and get the wider archery community involved and in fundraising? Could you be a positive influencer and spread the word around this pot and hopefully the good that it will be able to do? What could you do to help raise funding? And would you be around at the Disability Champs and maybe the National Indoor Championships? We're hoping to have a bit of a stand, sell the badges, and hopefully get people to donate and take part in fun little initiatives or sweepstakes. And any other suggestions you've got will be, yes, gratefully received. So that's the end of my spiel. If you don't mind, yeah, unsharing the slides and just open it up to any ideas anyone might have.